No one told Tom French the benefits of reading to his daughter in the NICU. But as a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, Tom instinctively sees the world through the lens of a story. He found refuge in the NICU by reading to Juniper, who was born at 23 weeks and 6 days and spent a harrowing 196 days in the NICU. Tom and his wife Kelly are co-authors of the deeply moving and powerful book, Juniper, the Girl Who Was Born Too Soon, that chronicles their NICU journey. Tom joins me now to talk about reading to Juniper in the NICU. Welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important podcast.
Thank you, Kelly, for letting me come on. I'm thrilled to be talking with you and talking to parents who are sitting in a NICU.
Well, Tom, I want to start by telling a little bit about Juniper's early arrival and the complications she faced. I know you share in great detail in the book Juniper, but for our listeners, can you give us a little background information about Juniper's early birth?
Sure. Juniper was born at 23 weeks and 6 days. She weighed 1 pound, 4 ounces. Her eyes were still fused shut, and she was very, very fragile. She was obviously intubated right away in the delivery room. Over the next several months, she went through many, many complications, including she had 2 different perforations in her bowels. She had all kinds of issues with her lungs. At one point, they thought she was going blind. She had a blood clot in her heart. She had an unusual condition for micropreemies called chylothorax, where her body swelled up dangerously with fluid. She went through a pretty long list of horrifying and harrowing complications.
She sure did, and I think a lot of the parents that are listening can relate to those challenges, those ups and downs. And I know you talk in your book about that you were wired for fatherhood. You had 2 older sons from a previous marriage. You were a little hesitant to have a baby a little later in life, but of course, we're so excited about having this little girl. But you were wired for fatherhood, but tell us, your initial reaction when Juniper was born so early and you had never probably even been in a NICU before. So tell us a little bit about the difference in that full-term birth of your first sons and what this was like for you as a father.
I am the oldest of 5 kids, and I was taking care of my younger siblings really from the time I was about 5, and have always been very comfortable with children and babies and love that. And when I had my 2 sons, who are now they're now 25 and 28, I was thrilled. I love being a dad. I just love everything about parenthood, and I just think it's the best. For me, that I was more than a little hesitant getting remarried and having another baby. Let's see, I'm now 59, about to turn 59, so Juniper's 5. It was about 10 years ago. I was about 49 when Kelly and I we got married and started trying to have a baby. And I was worried that I was going to miss out on, I wouldn't be there for my child, that I would, have a heart attack and I felt bad about the idea of not being there to help raise a child and feeling worried that was going to traumatize this child forever. And because I think that both mothers and fathers are extremely important. And so I had to have kind of a come to Jesus meeting with myself where I finally got over this hesitation. And it was really good, in fact, later on, that I had spent so much time really thinking it through. Because, as you know, when you have a micropreemie born, you really got to be ready for a pretty bumpy ride. And you have to be, if I hadn't been sure about what I wanted, I'm just not positive how I would have handled it. But I was sure, and when it was clear that Juniper was going to be born any moment at 23 weeks and 6 days, I still found it terrifying, because I don't know who I am if I'm not a dad. That's in my mind who I am first. And the idea of this little girl who I didn't know how I would feel when I saw her. Was she going to look so alien and so different that I wouldn't recognize her as my daughter? That was my fear as I was riding the elevator up to NICU and dreading this idea that maybe I wouldn't bond with my child. And That's about the most frightening thing I can think of. So when I walked up to an incubator the first time, I was very nervous, but I sat down and the nurses and the doctor were working on her. And after a certain point, the nurse said, you can reach your hand in and hold her hand if you want. You wash your hands a second time. And so I did. And put my little finger in her right palm, and she grabbed on really tight right away. And in that moment, just in that 1 second, I was totally swept away. All my doubts were swept away. All my dread or my fear of not bonding with her were swept away, because I could see that she was only about half finished in her normal development inside the womb, and that she had a lot of problems. But I could also see she was beautiful, and I saw all these possibilities inside of her, and I realized she's a work in progress, but so am I. At that moment, I fell in love.
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I think many of us have that same experience when we finally get to touch them or hold them or interact with them. A lot of those fears fade away that we had about being able to bond with this very medically fragile child. Well, I had to laugh in the book when you talk about you're a man on a mission. You said you were drawn to be there. Luckily, you were able to take a leave of absence from work and you were able to be there in the unit. But you kind of took some things to extreme. And I think that you were I think you baked cookies and you were taking extraneous notes about each of the nurses. Tell us a little bit about what drove you to do those things. Why were you so compelled to be there, and why did you feel it's so necessary to know so much about the people providing the care?
Funny. It's funny because the dads who are listening will understand this really well, that being a dad with any newborn, whether they're a micropreemie or a full-term baby, it's a little bit intimidating because the mom is designed to do everything. Her body creates the life and has food waiting for the baby, and the curve of her hips is a perfect place to hold the baby, and the timbre of her voice is exactly what babies respond to, and you can feel very irrelevant as a dad. And so when Juniper was born, those feelings were magnified because I couldn't even hold her for a long time, and so I was just trying to think of anything I could do, because what you want to do as a dad is you want to help. You want to be there. You want to not be irrelevant. And so I was, in the beginning, looking for anything I could do. So I got this irrational idea that if I learned something about all the nurses and all the respiratory techs and all the doctors, and I learned their names and little things about their families and their hobbies or whatever they talked about, that if I could sort of form a little bond with each of them, that if something went wrong, as I was pretty sure it was going to at some point, if something went wrong, I told my wife Kelly, I said, maybe they'll run a little faster. Now, I look back on that, and that was, I think it was a real mistaken assumption on my part, because those nurses and techs and doctors, they just work like crazy to help every single baby on that floor. And I don't honestly think it mattered if I'd done that, but that was something that I told myself I could do. And I thought, okay, I'll bake cookies. I have this special recipe for chocolate chip cookies that I got from my sister, and I'll bake cookies and I'll win them over, and somehow that'll translate into giving Juniper an edge. And I look back on it now, it's kind of funny, but at the moment it felt like it was all I could do. And maybe it was for me more than for anything else, so that I had the sense of doing something.
Or maybe even the sense of being in control of a situation you were so out of control. I think a friend had told you are, as a dad, you're the mule or you're the clown, right? And so mule meaning, I guess that's when you're having to haul everything around. I know I have memories of my husband in the airport with a car seat and the pack and play and the luggage, and I have the baby, so I get that as the mule, and then as the clown to, of course, entertain. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, feeling that bond, because you said when she took your finger, you felt an automatic bond. But no one had really talked to you about reading to the baby as a way of bonding. I don't think that that was something that you picked up in a brochure or a doctor told you to do. But I think because you are a writer, a journalist, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, I don't know if I said that earlier, you see life through stories. And you didn't pick the typical book to read to your child. So I want you to tell the parents a little bit about what book you picked and why you picked that.
Well, on the night when Junebug had her first real serious crisis, I was at home and I knew I wanted to read her something, and so I grabbed the first Harry Potter book, and it was a very worn and almost torn up copy of it because my sons and I had read all 7 of the books when they came out, and Harry Potter was a huge defining story of their childhoods. And, this was the same copy that they had started out reading, and I felt like they were with me with their sister when I read them. They were in college at the time and out in the world, and so they weren't with us there in the NICU. But I felt if I read to Junebug, her brothers would be with her, and, there would be this sense of connection. And my Kelly was a little bit skeptical. She said, "Well, what's wrong with Goodnight Moon?" And I laughed because I love Goodnight Moon. I read Goodnight Moon to my son and more recently to Juniper probably thousands of times. I can pretty much recite it off the top of my head. But that wouldn't have done it because Junebug's eyes weren't open yet. She didn't know there was anything beyond the darkness of that incubator. She didn't know there were cows jumping over the moon or little bears in chairs or mittens and kittens, all these, a bowl full of mush, all the images in Goodnight Moon. No more than she would have understood what a wizard or a witch was, or a dementor or magic. And so the words, the actual surface content of the words and meaning of the words, that wasn't what was going to matter. What was going to matter was the rhythms of J.K. Rowling's beautiful sentences and a sense of something unfolding, something worth waiting for. And I wanted all of that with me and with Juniper in the NICU. And on that first night, what I really wanted was to be able to read the title of chapter 1 of book 1, which is The Boy Who Lived. And so I started reading it. It was the middle of the night. And, again, looking back on it, like you were saying about the control, it was probably as much for me as it was for Junebug. But, having been in the NICU, Kelly, that you can see right away from the monitor and the SAT number what the baby is responding to and what they don't like. And I think it was the first day I was reading and I got to the first section where Hagrid appears. And I started reading Hagrid's voice in that very gruff, Scottish voice. And Junebug's SAT number plummeted. And Kelly sort of nudged me and she said, "Stop it, you're scaring the baby." And I was like, "That's not possible." I knew that they were sensitive, but these babies were that sensitive. So I tried the voice again and again, it plummeted. And I was like, well, okay. So from that point forward, I resolved that I was going to read everything in a very sweet, almost sing-songy voice, whether I was reading about the Dementors or Lord Voldemort or whatever. So it was really just a way to get started, to give her a sense of there being something more outside that box.
That's wonderful. I just think that's so beautiful. I don't think that I ever thought about it that way. I really didn't think about reading to Jackson. They had, talked to us about bonding and the need to bond with them, but I didn't know how to bond with a baby I couldn't hold or feed. And they asked us to talk so softly. I have a horrible singing voice, so I certainly wasn't going to sing to him. And I couldn't even think of the words. I know you can relate when you're in the NICU, just your brain is so scattered. I couldn't even remember words, but I just think it's so beautiful that you had the inclination to grab that book because it was so special to you and your family and to bring her into that story. Now, Tell me, how many of the books in the series did you get through? Because she was there 196 days. So how far into the series did you get?
Well, I started out reading not really with a plan. I just started reading. And that first night, I literally fell asleep sitting in the stool beside her incubator. And I literally closed the book and held it in my palm and rested my face against it like a pillow. And it was very comforting. And so I just started reading, and I felt like J.K. Rowling had her incantations, and Harry and Hermione and Ron had theirs, and I needed mine. And so I started reading, and at first the nurses were skeptical. Like they just kind of were laughing a little bit. They didn't try to stop me, but they were like, he's reading like a 4,000-page series. And but pretty soon the nurses started to get caught up in the story, and I would stop for the afternoon or whatever, and they would say, "Oh, keep going. I want to know what happens." And of course, that was what I wanted for Junebug. It was for her to get a sense of something is coming, something beautiful and wonderful is coming if we keep reading. And so I read usually very softly, like you were just saying, Kelly. I would stand beside the incubator early in the morning. I had a little book light attached to the book. The room was completely dark, usually. And I would reach inside and hold Junebug's hand with one hand and rest the book on the the incubator, and just keep reading. And you could see, as we went on, you could see the effect on her SAT number. And it got to a point where if I would stop reading, that number would start to plummet instantly. And the nurses would say, you better get back here. And we were reading along, and we were near the end of the first book, Junebug and I, when I had this terrible thought. Juniper was really going through a tough time. It was pretty clearly on the edge of dying. And I had this terrible thought while we were driving to the hospital of, what if I don't get to finish reading her book one and she doesn't get to hear the ending? What if she doesn't get to know that Harry and Hermione and Ron are okay? What if she's just trapped in this limbo of no resolution? And that idea just unhinged me, and I had to pull over. But she hung in there, and I kept reading, and we got through book two, and she loved book two. I say loved in that she sat at high. She especially sat at high whenever I read the sections with Dobby. Now, maybe she was picking up on something in my voice, because Dobby's one of my all-time favorite characters in those books. But she was just thrilled. And, and she had some similarities with Dobby at that point, to be honest. Little house elf. And I kept reading, and we just kept going, and we kept going through that long summer. And, there were these times when I would be reading through a Cowley, and it felt like the rest of the world was gone. It was just her and me in this story. And, oh God, it was a gift that J.K. Rowling gave us. And I know she helped Junebug, but she helped me too. And we kept going and kept reading. Junebug got stronger and a little bit bigger. Not a lot bigger, but a little bit bigger. And we just kept going. And by the time we got to the point where she was getting ready to be discharged, we were pretty deep into book 7, the final book. But I couldn't finish it because she had grown to the point where she could move around and I could hold her. And she was restless, and she would want to, me to play her a song or something instead of just reading to her. And so I told her, okay, we'll stop reading for now. But when you're a little older and when you're ready, we're going to read this whole thing over again.
And that series is, I want to say, like 4,000 pages. Is that right?
Something like that.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I know later that Juniper, or Junebug, as you so lovingly call her, she received a gift. You want to tell us a little bit about that very special gift?
Yeah, it was postmarked from Scotland. And we opened it up, and it was a deluxe set of the books. And it was from J.K. Rowling. and she had signed every book. And the first one said, "To Juniper, the girl who lived." Loved J.K. Rowling. And it was this incredible, thoughtful, inspiring gift. She had heard our story on Radiolab, not knowing that it was going to involve Harry Potter, her creation. And she had been touched by it and had reached out to us. And then she'd sent Junebug this beautiful, beautiful gift.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned Radiolab, because I do want to say that your story, produced by Radiolab, called 23 Weeks and 6 Days, it really was kind of inspired me to start this NICU Now support series, because I listened to that podcast multiple times and just felt so inspired and drawn to you and Kelly and all you've been through, and how eloquently and how honest you tell the story. I do encourage our listeners to listen to 23 Weeks and 6 Days on Radiolab, and also, if they're so inspired, to pick up Juniper, the Girl Who Was Born Too Soon. It's just such a beautiful book. But you are very honest in the book about, you kind of played a part early on. You know, the dad on the mission, the baking the cookies, the taking the notes, always being there, and truly believing with all your heart that Juniper would make it. And then you came to a point where you finally broke down. And I think I want dads to know, and moms to know too, that that's normal, that we go through a lot of different emotions, and there's no rhyme or reason to them or the timing of them. But I just wanted you to speak to the dads out there about being honest about your feelings and communicating openly, not only with your wife, but your friends and those that support you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Well, I don't want to stereotype dads too much, but I think that a lot of dads, including myself, we've been sort of raised and encouraged to feel like we need to be more stoic and more in control of ourselves and our emotions. Which is funny for me to say that, having gotten emotional here several times in this conversation. But I think we think that we're supposed to be there to be strong and to be brave. And I certainly wanted to help my Kelly with her grief and her fear. And I felt like to do that, I had to be very strong and very stable. And I think all of that was good, except that I was sort of ignoring this very real fear and grief that I was feeling. And I did tell myself that, yes, she's going to make it. She's going to make it. She's going to make it. But beneath the surface of that those assurances, I could see how perilous it was and how tenuous it was. And so when I had that awful moment, realizing, I'm wondering if I'm going to get to read at the end of the book, the first book, that let out all of these other fears and just this grief and loss that I was feeling. And I was a wreck for a few days there, because I had to recalibrate. I had to find someplace between trying to be stoic and pushing everything down and just being a wreck. I had to try to find someplace to I could actually be standing beside the incubator and be helpful and yet be honest with myself about what I was feeling. Because you're absolutely right, Kelly. You don't know what you're going to feel, and you don't know what's going to spark these floods of emotion. And I think you just have to, again, accept that you're not in control all the time, and make your peace with that, and to try to let those things flow the way they're going to flow. Because if you don't, I think you're going to be worse in the long run. I mean, for dads who are out there, I just think all the things you're feeling and all the questions and doubts and fears, they're really, really normal. And you've got to be able to talk about them with someone. And to be able to do that, you've got to first be able to admit them to yourself.
Right. And I think one of the things that you mentioned that helped process those emotions for you and help you regain your footing was being more integrated into Junebug's care. So you talked about learning to hold her. You were very scared to pick her up, but they encouraged you to pick her up so they could change the bedding. And so that was one of the first things you learned. And you learned how to take a temperature and to brush her hair and to change the diaper. So I think, just encouraging dads to be a very important part of the care of the baby can help them process those emotions and build that bond. Would you agree?
Oh, again, having raised my siblings, holding a baby is like at the heart of that. And I couldn't do that at first, but as time went on, I was able to. And all those little things just mattered so much to be able to change your diaper and, work your hands through all those wires. And the diaper is so small. It's like the size of a playing card. I couldn't believe how small it was. And, to be able to brush her hair and put some water on her lips when they were chapped, and just to be there for her. I was reading and telling her stories, and then I was singing to her and playing songs for her. I don't have a very good singing voice either, but she didn't seem to mind.
I hate to interrupt you, but I have to, because I think it's important for the dads out there, moms too. You weren't singing, I don't know, your typical lullabies. Tell them a little bit about some of your favorite music that you played for Junebug and why those songs are so special.
I'm a huge Springsteen fan, and my whole family were Springsteen fans. I took my sons to see their first shows when they were little kids, and now they've traveled around the country with me to see him, and all my siblings and my dad and my mom, and we went to Europe to see him in Berlin. So Springsteen is a really, really important part of our family, and so I knew I was going to play Springsteen. And in fact, the first song that I sang to her, even before she was born, when she was in the womb, was Thunder Road. And when I finally got to really hold Junebug, it wasn't the thing where I knew I was getting to hold her. Our wonderful nurse Tracy, asked me to hold her for a second while she was doing something with the bedding. And then I realized it was going on, and then she put a chair underneath me, and I realized, oh my God, I'm actually holding my daughter. And it wasn't even a choice. I just started singing Thunder Road. And I got to tell you, it was the most raggedy, sorry rendition of Thunder Road you're going to ever hear. But I had to sing to that song. And pretty soon I was singing her Blue Bayou by Roy Orbison, and just a lot of different songs. But Springsteen was the heart of it. Played her a lot of Springsteen songs. Her favorite, if you go by the numbers on her monitor, was a song called Waiting on a Sunny Day, which I couldn't have invented a more fitting choice for my daughter to make, because here she was in this darkness, and the room is really dark because they wanted to replicate the womb, which I totally understand. So she had not really felt the sun on her skin. She'd never seen a sunrise or a sunset. She just knew darkness. So the song just felt right, and she would sat at 100 every time I played it, and made me really happy. So she was a Springsteen fan early on. The indoctrination began right away, and she didn't have much of a choice.
No, she didn't. And from what I understand, she had the opportunity to meet Springsteen at a book signing not that long ago. I know that had to be a remarkably emotional moment for your wife and you and Junebug too.
Oh, it was. He was signing books at a bookstore in Harvard, and so we went up for that. I didn't have a ticket. I stayed outside with the suitcases. I couldn't get one, but Kelly went in with Junebug, and there's this photo of it if you're able to see it, where you can see Kelly she wants so badly to tell Bruce about how much his music had meant to us that she kind of got overwhelmed, and on her face she's not even smiling. But Junebug is sitting there, and she's just thrilled in meeting Springsteen. And afterwards she was saying, well, he already knows me because he plays me all those songs. And I love that idea that he plays those songs just for her. It's just such a powerful thing, what someone like J.K. Rowling or Springsteen or other artists, where they create something out of nothing. And, creation and creativity are the most beautiful and sacred things that human beings can do. Is of course why mothers are so important. And but here's something that the artists do. That's its own kind of creation. And, to create these stories and to send them out to the world. And they have no idea how many lives those stories are going to touch or shape or affect. And it's a beautiful thing. To me, it's a form of communion, because the artist creates the story, but without someone to hear it or read it, it's nothing. It has to be an act of mutual creation between the artist and the audience. And that communion is deeply, deeply sacred.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I just think it's so phenomenal to see it come full circle. And I believe Junebug is 5 now. Is that correct?
She would stop being correct as well. She's 5.5.
She's 5.5. Yes, she is. And in kindergarten, is that right?
Yes, she is.
So she's doing wonderfully. I've seen lots of pictures of her, and she's
doing great.
She's had the opportunity to go back to the NICU, and even she crawled up into an incubator. They allowed it. They had it there for her to look at, and she wanted to get in it. So I think just to encourage families to know, not everyone gets the happy ending, and I want to recognize and acknowledge that. I mean, you and I have had a happy ending. There's been a lot of challenges along the way. There are going to continue to be challenges, but I do just think that we have been so truly blessed, and to find those moments, the moments where we're able to hold their hands, read to them, sing to them, and appreciate all the special milestones and moments in the NICU, and hopefully look forward to the beautiful, happy ending. Before you go, I'm going to embarrass you just a little bit. Do you remember the words to Preemie Pokey?
Yes, I do.
You do. Well, I think it would be just wonderful if you could. I know you say you don't have a beautiful singing voice, but teach us the words to Preemie Pokey, because I think a lot of parents out there might find some joy in sharing that new rendition of Hokey Pokey with their little babies. So can you do that for me?
I got to preface it by saying this is something I just made up, just being silly. But for some reason she loved it. Junebug did. And there were times when that was what would help her when she was having a tough day feel better. So I would sing the song and I'd say, you put your ventilator in, you put your ventilator out. Well, you put your Bovariac in, you put your Bovariac out, put your Bovariac in, and you shake it all about. You do the Preemie Pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about.
Well, I think you have a beautiful singing voice, and I can't think of
darling.
a better song. And I just think that's perfect, because we need to find the joy. It's okay to be happy in the NICU. It really is. I know we're surrounded by so much stress and trauma, but we need to find the joy and celebrate those moments.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, please.
For me, the scariest moment was before I realized that I was going to bond with her. Because once I bonded with her and I understood this was my daughter, I was grateful, to know her. And Kel and I talked about this in the hardest days. I said, even if she doesn't make it through tonight, I'm glad I got to know her. I'm glad I got to hold her hand and sing to her and read to her. And that she knows your voice and she knows mine. And, I wouldn't have traded those moments. It would have been terrible if and really, really painful, of course, if she hadn't made it. But I would not have regretted loving my daughter and appreciating every moment that I had with her from that point forward. We would go down to the chapel in the ground floor of the hospital, and there'd be parents in there writing to God, and they would say things like, I only had 2 weeks with my daughter, or with my son. Thank you. Thank you for those 2 weeks. I think that's where you've got to get to, is you've got to realize that nobody knows how much time they have with those they love. And you have to really, it's cliche, but it's true, you have to find a way to make the most of every single day that you have with those you love. And that's what we tried to do, and we're still trying to do it.
Thank you so much, Tom, for sharing from your heart and for the time and just the professionalism. And we want to be real, and we want the parents in the NICU to know we've been there. We know what it feels like. And they are not alone. They are normal. And just this encouragement that we can provide for them. There are organizations out there and mentors and
It's work you're doing, Kelly. It's so important.
well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I just thank you for being a part of this very important podcast. Now, before I let you go, there were two questions that I want to back up and ask you that kind of came to mind after the fact. So, Tom, you talked to us about the challenging times for you in the NICU when you really struggled. And I know in the book you talk about having to be strong for Kelly. Did you struggle with depression or anxiety? Did you seek out any support or counseling beyond just your immediate family or the social workers in your NICU?
I did not talk to a counselor immediately. Kelly went pretty soon after we got out of the NICU, and at a certain point, both of us went to see this counselor, and it was really helpful. It was very helpful to talk about everything we've been through and the effect on us, and sort of come to terms with some of those sorrows and making sense of them. So yeah, we did. I'm a big believer in therapy and finding a good counselor who can help you. I'm from a family of people who, to us, in my family, going to the therapist like going to the dentist. It's not a big deal. There's no stigma. If you need something that you need help on, then you should ask for help. That's what we believe and what I believe.
Well, I believe in that too. I think that's a great way to put it. It is like going to the dentist, and I want to demystify counseling and support and therapy and support groups. I think we all need that at some point in our lives, and can be so helpful for helping parents navigate the NICU, because I know in the book you're very honest about Kelly struggling to go to the NICU on some days, struggling to get out of bed. There was a period of time where neither one of you were brushing your hair or your teeth or changing clothes, and I think that's very normal. That is just extremely normal with all the pressure that we're under as parents. But I just felt like it was important for me to ask you if you had sought out support and encourage other families to do so as well.
I think it's really important. And, we, in our reporting after we got out of the NICU and we knew we were going to write about this, Kelly met this doctor in Kansas City who is a medical ethicist, and one of his specialties is neonatology. And one of his insights that he'd gained from talking to many parents who've gone through this over the decades is that a lot of parents describe it as being dropped inside a cave when you're in the NICU. He's like, you're in this place and you don't know how to get out. And that resonated with me and Kelly because we kept talking about the tunnel. We felt like we've been dropped in a tunnel and there was no way back to the surface of the earth, to these lives that we recognized as our own. And what Dr. Lantos said was that over and over again, what he learned from these parents who went through this was that the best way to find your way out of the tunnel, the best method, is to talk about what you've been through, to tell the story of it, whether it's to a therapist or to your best friend or somebody. But if you just keep it inside yourself, it's really hard to deal with all that. And that, telling your story and getting it out, that allows you to, carve a path back toward the light.
Very well put. Well, before I let you go, do you happen to have a copy of Juniper with you nearby?
Yes.
I was wondering if I might ask you to read for us on page 264.
Okay.
You start with saying, the songs we sang and the books we read. Would you read that paragraph for us?
Sure. In the darkness of Junebug's room, in the light of everything beyond, stories were my best defense against randomness. If the world was defined by the tension between order and chaos, then our lives unfolded in perpetual countercurrents of meaning and meaninglessness. I saw it whenever I walked into the NICU, where the alarms were constantly sounding. The songs we sang, the books we read, all of them helped keep our family afloat. They calmed us, inspired us, helped us hang on through the long months of not knowing how our daughter's story would end. Every time we opened to another page of Harry Potter, the story transported us to other lives and other experiences that echoed our own. They helped the three of us imagine a future after the hospital. They told our daughter she was not alone.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And I think that's what we want for all our babies, to know that they are not alone. And I just hope everyone is encouraged to read to their babies, sing to their babies, be integrated into their care, and to seek the support that they need so that they can be strong caregivers and advocates for their babies. Tom, thank you so much for joining us for our podcast. In order for NICU babies to thrive after discharge, they need smart, informed parents who understand their needs and are emotionally and physically capable of caring for a medically fragile child. Peer-to-peer support is an effective tool for helping parents navigate their NICU stay. Support from a caring and informed NICU graduate parent helps a new family feel more capable, confident, and ready to face the journey ahead. To request support, volunteer, or donate, please visit our website at handtohold.org. Our quote to remember today is by Tom French. A story is a promise. It is a promise that the end is worth waiting for.